And if in the exact instant that life escapes the body, you were flooded by a truth so painful that any physical pain would seem a shiver, imagine the last breath not as a relief, but as the beginning of a conscious nightmare, belated regret. The Spiritist Doctrine, based on the works of Allan Kardec, reveals that death does not erase our consciousness. On the contrary, it amplifies it. What happens then to those who only realize the size of their errors when it is too late? The answer is not a simple punishment, but a process as complex as the human mind, and its first chapter is a brutal awakening in a world shaped by one's own bad choices. This awakening on the other side, this shock of post-mortem reality, has a name and an address within the spiritual cosmology. It is not the hell of eternal flames that many imagine. It is something more subtle, more psychological, and therefore perhaps more terrifying. The spirits call this the umbral, and do not think that it is a fixed place with signs and borders. The umbral, as vividly described by André Luiz in the book Our Home, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is much more a state of consciousness than a geographical location. It is the landscape that our mind creates when we are laden with guilt, remorse, hatred, and selfishness. It is as if all our bad intentions, all our dark thoughts, gained life and formed the environment around us. The law that governs this moment is the law of attraction. You simply go where your vibration, your inner state, resonates. So think about that spirit who has just died with a huge weight of late regret. He is not received by angels with harps. He does not see a tunnel of light. He finds himself in a sort of thick mist, a perpetual twilight, surrounded by indistinct forms and heavy feelings. The first sensation is of absolute and crushing solitude, but he is not alone. He is surrounded by other consciences that vibrated on the same negative frequency. They are spirits in suffering, many still rebellious, others apathetic, some repeating mentally like a mantra of torture, the mistakes they made. It is a spiritual city of shadows, built brick by brick with the materials of our wrong choices. And what is the greatest torment in this place? It is not monsters or external demons. The worst tormentor dwells within. Memory, now freed from the limits of the physical brain, becomes a high-definition cinema that cannot be turned off. The spirit is forced to relive every moment of its past life, but with brutal clarity. It does not merely relive its actions, it relives the consequences of them. It feels in its intimacy the pain of the wife who betrayed him, the despair of the son who neglected him, the humiliation of the colleague who slandered him. It is as if all the blows that he inflicted returned to him, not physically, but in the form of a belated and agonizing empathy. He sees the opportunities for kindness he ignored, the requests for help he turned his back on, the loves he trampled on, and each of these scenes is a cut in the soul. The mentor spirits, who are like social workers and psychologists of the spiritual world, explain that this suffering is not a punishment imposed by an avenging God. It is a natural, automatic consequence. It is the law of cause and effect in its most immediate stage. You planted wind, now you are harvesting a storm in your own perception. The regret in this stage is pure, raw pain, but it is often still a passive suffering. It is an I feel terrible about what I did, but that is not yet transformed into a what can I do to fix this? And it is there that the trap lies. Because being stuck in this loop of guilt and self-pity is like being bogged down in a swamp. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. The umbral then becomes a zone of waiting, a distressing waiting. The spirit remains there, reliving its past, feeling the weight of what it did, but without knowing how to leave. Light and greater understanding seem distant, filtered by this dense mist that it itself generated. It can pass decades, centuries in this state, measured by our time, until a crucial fact happens within it, until the simple pain of remorse gives way to another feeling, a spark that needs to ignite so that the journey continues. This spark is what will determine whether it will remain stagnant in the shadow of its past, or whether it will find the path, however difficult it may be, to begin to repair its errors. So this spark finally ignites. The passive pain of regret, that simple suffering in the underworld, begins to transform. It becomes a restlessness, a deep desire to change, to leave that darkness. The spirit, tired of being a spectator of its own failure, begins to call out for a chance, for an exit. And it is in this moment that it attracts the attention of spiritual mentors, evolved spirits who act as guides. They approach, not with judgment, but with firm compassion, and they bring with them the light of understanding about the law that governs the entire process of reparation, the law of cause and effect. This law, explained clearly by Allan Kardec in the Book of Spirits, is not a punishment. It is a pedagogical law, like gravity. If you let go of an object, it falls. If you spread hatred and selfishness, you reap suffering and loneliness. It is simple, direct, and impartial. And the mentors show this repentant spirit the complete map of its actions. They reveal thread by thread how each wrong choice wove a network of consequences that affected the lives of dozens, perhaps hundreds of other people. Seeing this with spiritual clarity is a new blow, but now a necessary blow. It is the accurate diagnosis of the disease, however painful it may be. And the remedy, the cure for this spiritual debt. The mentors present the path, and it almost always passes through a familiar portal, but now seen with other eyes, reincarnation. However, it will not be any ordinary reincarnation. It will not be a life to seek pleasures or material achievements. It will be a specific mission, meticulously planned, called a corrective trial or expiation. The idea is as just as challenging. To learn the value of what was destroyed, you need to experience the other side. To understand the pain that was caused, you need to feel it on your own skin in similar circumstances. Imagine the man who abandoned his family. He can be reborn in a condition where he feels in his flesh the pain of abandonment. The woman who used lies to destroy reputations can return as a victim of devastating slander. The greedy being who exploited others can be reborn in extreme poverty to learn dignity in simplicity. These are situations created not by a cruel fate, but by the implacable logic of learning. How do you teach a child that fire burns? Do you let her feel a little of the heat? Reincarnation restorative is this heat, this direct experience. The mentors then begin to sketch out with this spirit the roadmap for the next life. They show the main characters he will meet again, often the same people he hurt, now in new roles. They show the trials he will face, the limitations he will have, the pains he will need to overcome. It is a rescue plan, but one that requires Herculean courage to be accepted. Because to the spirit, still fragile and marked by the suffering of the underworld, this proposal seems at first glance a double punishment. He thinks, I have already suffered the consciousness of my error. Now I still have to return to suffer and practice? It is the moment of the great hesitation. The mind is flooded with terrifying questions. What if I fail again? What if the pain is too great and I rebel, making things worse? Wouldn't it be better to stay here, in the suffering I already know, than to throw myself into this unknown abyss of a life of reparation? This fear paralyzes. It is a fear that can freeze a spirit for an immeasurable time, keeping it in a limbo between the guilt of the past and the terror of the future. And it is at this point of paralysis, this chill in the soul before the precipice of a new beginning, that a final decision must be made. A decision that will separate those who will remain as specters of their own past, those who, even trembling with fear, will take the leap towards their own redemption. And it is in this cold silence, before the map of a life that seems like a sentence, that the turn happens. The spirit, after reliving its pain in the underworld and facing the cold logic of reparation, asks the only question that matters: who do I want to be from now on? to remain in the shadows, rotting in a sterile regret, or to face the purifying fire of the trial to be reborn, clean. This intimate decision, this yes whispered with a trembling but firm voice, is the most important moment of its post-death journey. It is not an angel that pushes it. It is its own divine spark, tired of suffering, calling for growth.
When this yes sprouts from the deepest part of being, everything transforms. The same mentors who presented the difficult plan now smile because they see the spark of courage. They explain that that map of suffering is not a curse, but a curriculum. Each trial is a practical lesson to develop the virtue opposite to one's past error. Solitude teaches the value of love, poverty, detachment, illness, compassion. The journey back to matter begins, but now with a sacred purpose. He will not go alone. He receives the promise of constant spiritual support, even in the darkest moments of the new life, so that he does not give up.
And so the spirit that repents late finds not an end, but a radical beginning. Divine justice, as Kardec teaches, is always merciful. It does not offer a cheap pardon that does not transform, but rather a golden opportunity, the chance to sweat, struggle, and weep, to erase with one's own hands the errors of the past. Redemptive reincarnation is the ultimate proof that we are never lost. Even the most late repentance is the seed of a new tree, which, watered with the tears of self-effort, one day will bear the fruits of inner peace. History ends with a powerful lesson. Our worst falls can, with courage, become the foundations of our greatest elevation.